Really appreciate so many of you showing up on time. So we'll get started. I'll continue to keep an eye on the waiting room to see if we have anyone else joining us, but we have a lot to cover. So we're going to get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shirley Weir. I'm the founder of Menopause Chicks. I spend a lot of my time inside the Menopause Chicks private online community. I hope you're all members. It's just a fabulous collection of women and health professionals, as well as quality education. So our mission is to empower women to navigate perimenopause to menopause and beyond with confidence and ease. And one of the things that I love, absolutely love about this work is the healthcare professionals who step forward and say yes every single time I put the question out. And tonight is no different than that. So in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be introducing you to Dr. Karen Parmar, who's going to walk us through the most recent and up-to-date information around hormone therapy. We're going to bust myths. We're going to set the record straight. We're going to draw a line in the sand tonight, especially if you are joining us perhaps with any confusion or conflicting historical information. All of that ends tonight. We're going to set the record straight. Dr. Karen has a presentation that's probably around 40 minutes or so, and then we're going to have a Q&A, which I will moderate. So we're going to, because there's so many of us, I'll ask you to post your question. You can do it at any time in the chat. If you haven't found the chat yet, just hover your mouse either along the bottom or the top of your screen and post your question in there. There's two ways you can ask it. You can post it to the whole group, which is always beneficial. Or if you have something that you want to message me privately on, that is fine as well. What else did I want to tell you? We are doing so many of these events. I'm having so much fun. So with your ticket, tonight, you received many things, one of which is a copy, an electronic copy of Mokita, How to Navigate Perimenopause with Confidence and Ease. And so the link for the book and the bonuses was sent out around 3 o'clock this afternoon. If you didn't get it, just message me either through the Facebook community or you can email me at shirley@menopausechicks.com. Sometimes my email address does get tripped up in some spam filter. So I want to make sure that you have that. There is also a code in that email so that you can get $10 off at purepharmacy.com. I always point the wrong way. I'm sitting in front of a banner for Pure Pharmacy for a couple of different reasons. One, they have partnered with Menopause Chicks to compound a vaginal moisturizer for the prevention and treatment of vaginal dryness. And I won't talk about that too much, but I just want you to be aware of it. You can order it online, and you got a code tonight to save $10 on your order if it's over $100. So that's really exciting. The owner and CEO of Pure Pharmacy is Bob Mayer. He's a co-author of Mokita, and you do want to check out his chapter because he talks about iron deficiency and how iron deficiency can mimic some of the hormone experiences we can have in midlife. So it's really important information. And then thirdly, just by having Menopause Chicks support Pure Pharmacy helps keep our community awesome and free. So I just want to say that and give the folks at Pure a shout out. As well as our special guest tonight actually works in the same building as a Pure Pharmacy in Fort Langley. So if you're so inclined after we wrap up tonight and want to go and work with Dr. Karen or one of her colleagues, you will be passing right through Pure Pharmacy. So that's really exciting. Okay, I'm going to get this party started. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce somebody that I've only known for a short while, probably since January or February of this year. And yet we've had the opportunity to work together. This is the third time. Dr. Karen, you are so gracious with your time, your passion for women's midlife health, and sharing your expertise. So I'm going to pass this baton to you because I know you have a lot of information to cover. You can introduce yourself, and please let everyone know where we can get a hold of you and work with you too. So I want to make sure that you include that in your notes. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Karen Parmar.
Thank you very much, Shirley. It is my pleasure to be here tonight and to have the opportunity to speak with all of you. A little bit about myself. I have been in practice since 2000 in the Lower Mainland, Fort Langley. My practice has always been around women's health, gynecology, hormone imbalances, fertility, infertility, and in the latter years, last 5-7 years, a lot of interest around perimenopause, menopause, because I am a perimenopausal chick. So I spent a lot of my time reading about that and learning a lot about it. And it's really just an extension of the hormone imbalances that I've dealt with in my entire practice in women who have been trying to conceive or been unable to carry to term. I am the past president of our regulatory body, the College of Naturopathic Physicians of BC. I'm licensed in both British Columbia, Canada, and also in Washington State in the USA. I've been a member of the Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology of Canada for many years, and I'm also a member of the North American Menopause Society, and that name will come up throughout this talk. The talk is called Hormone Therapy, an Updated Perspective. But as I wrote that, I wondered, is this really an updated perspective, or is this a revisited perspective? Is it a new yet old perspective? Because as we're going to walk through this talk, you're going to see that hormone therapy has been utilized for a long, long time. And it was very much common practice for physicians up until the early 2000s to prescribe this for women who were entering their perimenopause and especially their menopausal years. A lot of research points to why we did that. And tonight, I really want to walk you through the evidence, and I want to help you to understand why it's so difficult to access now and why it's such a debated topic, because a lot of people don't know what the history is. And I think if I can share that with you and educate you, you'll have an understanding of why maybe you're getting physicians to push back, and you're having difficulty if you're trying to access that or even get questions about it. So that's really what I want to do tonight. This is evidence heavy. It's not a soft, easy topic to go through. I didn't want to come here and just share my opinion. It's not really for me solely about opinion. I can form an opinion once I see the research, but you really have to see what the history is in the research to make an opinion. And I feel like a lot of people don't know what the history is in the research, and they're forming opinions that aren't based on truth. And that's really a disservice to a lot of women. So that's the point of the talk. I'm going to try to keep it light, keep it informative, but I really do have to show you the evidence in the research, and then you can make decisions better on your own. And that's the point of why I'm here. And really what I'm passionate about at this point in time in my practice is sharing this information. So it doesn't want to move. 1 second here.
Arrows maybe in the bottom left or right corner.
My arrow is moving all over the place. Okay, I did it. So some abbreviations for this talk. HRT refers to hormone replacement therapy. And when I say HRT, it means estrogen plus progesterone. If I say ET, it means estrogen therapy alone. So we'll keep those two things in mind. So some history of HRT. So Estrogen therapy was first utilized in 1942, first derived from pregnant horses' urine, called Premarin, pregnant mare's urine. That's where they got the name. And that was the first utilization of estrogen therapy. It was used for a couple of decades. In 1966, Robert Wilson wrote a book called Feminine Forever. And really his take-home message was all women need to take estrogen therapy to remain feminine. This did not sit well with a lot of people. It didn't sit well with the medical community. And it was found out later that Robert Wilson was sponsored by the makers of Premarin. And that created a lot of distrust in the medical community because people were taking this information as like scientific, and he was sponsored by the makers of Premarin. It didn't stop the prescriptions, but it made people wonder whether or not this was really true. In 1975, it was discovered that women on estrogen therapy had a 4 to 8 times more risk of endometrial cancer. And that still stands. Estrogen makes your uterus lining grow. And women now with a uterus, if they're given hormones, will be given estrogen and progesterone because estrogen makes your uterus grow. And that is just a known fact. So in the mid 1980s, they figured this out and they added in progestin. So, which is a synthetically made progesterone. And it was found to take away the risks of endometrial cancer that happens with estrogen alone. And now this prescribing habit was the norm. Estrogen from horses' urine, CEE, conjugated equine estrogens, with synthetic progesterone. That continued along. They did many studies on that. They released a lot of studies on that. In 1982, they published a study that finds that estrogen is not associated with increased breast cancer risk. And you'll see little numbers after all of these statements because these are all referenced. And at the end of the talk, there's a list of 40 different references that you'll have access to. This is not my opinion. These are reference statements. So 1982, one of the first big studies, estrogen is not associated with the increase of breast cancer risk. In 1986, another study from the National Cancer Institute found no increase in breast cancer for women taking Premarin for 20 years. In 1988, there was a meta-analysis. One second here, I just need to move this over. That's okay. A meta-analysis that showed that there was no association between hormone replacement therapy and breast cancer. 1991, another study out of Boston, no increase in women taking Premarin for a number of years. And in 1991, there's analysis of 28 studies showing no association between estrogen replacement therapy and breast cancer. So now we have about 2 decades of research showing no correlation between hormone replacement therapy, that's conjugated equine estrogens and synthetic progesterone, and breast cancer. In 1992, the first randomized controlled study was published. And this is a big deal because in the medical world, people like random controlled studies, double-blind, placebo, one group doesn't know they're getting the medicine, one group neither group know what's happening. They're both blinded. One doesn't get the medicine, one does, and they're studied. So this is 22 years of studying 168 randomly chosen postmenopausal women, and it was in a mental hospital. And one group received hormone replacement therapy, and one group received a placebo. And they studied them for 2 decades. 11.5% of the women taking placebo developed breast cancer, and none of the women on HRT did. That was a big deal. In 1993, the New England Journal of Medicine out of Harvard stated that from the basis of all available evidence, we recommend that all postmenopausal women be considered candidates for hormone replacement therapy and should be educated about its risks and its benefits. In 1995, first wave of information came out from a giant study called the Nurses' Health Study, over 122,000 women, study from 1976 to 92. And even the women who took hormone replacement therapy for 10 years have no increased risk of breast cancer compared with the women who never took it. This study is criticized in that they feel like nurses are healthier and perhaps skew the data. So this one gets critiqued because it's a group of nurses. So some doctors and researchers like to say, we're not going to really look at that one so much because this is a healthier population. But you can see the evidence was overwhelming up to this point in time that hormone replacement therapy was not causing breast cancer. And I should say that up until 1900s, the average lifespan of a woman was 50 years old. So this whole menopause and living past our reproductive years has only been around for the last century. We all died around 50, and now the average age is 83, and some of us live to be older than that and living half of our life without the estrogen and progesterone and testosterone that we're used to. So people could say, well, it's not natural to study women on hormones and to give people hormones, but really it's because we're living longer that this really is even being looked at, and it's debated and used for treatment. I went too far one. Aha. Okay, so yes, forming a consensus. So by 2000, researchers, oncologists, doctors, educators, they were all coming to the consensus that estrogen does not increase the risk of breast cancer. There were a few naysayers, and there are a few studies that have been cited that show that this is not true. And really, it's two of them. So who would think estrogen causes breast cancer this time? Well, those who make a claim to these dangers of hormones and breast cancer really cite two studies. One is out of Sweden, 1989, and one was published in The Lancet, which is another big medical journal, in 1997. So this is a summary of the Sweden study. It was in Uppsala, Sweden, and they reported a shocking 440% increased risk of breast cancer among the women who have been studied. So let's talk about this for a little bit. So first of all, they had 23,000 women in this study, but instead of looking at the medical records of 23,000, because that would be very time consuming, they randomized it and looked at the records of about 640 women. In that 640 women, they found that there was no increased risk of breast cancer for those that were taking estrogen alone. Among the smaller group of women who were taking both estrogen and progesterone, they calculated that 2.2 breast cancers should be expected out of that subset based on statistics. Instead, 10 women developed breast cancer, which is 440% more than 2.2. So the headline was 440% increased risk of breast cancer. And this is the interesting thing with studies. They can report them on a relative risk, it's called, which is 440% when you compare the 2.2 to the 10, or they can report them on an absolute risk, which is when you compare the number of people who get it to the actual amount of people in the study. And so that's a confusing thing to get your head around, and you're going to see how that comes into play in a little bit when we talk about some more recent studies. Anyway, it was an increased risk in what they expected. It was published. Some people will talk about this study if they believe that there is a link and they think that hormone therapy is dangerous for causing breast cancer. This was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was alarming to a lot of physicians. A study was also published by the same people who did this study shortly after, and they recorded a better prognosis among breast cancer patients who were on hormone replacement therapy at the time of diagnosis than those who were not. I have to repeat that. They said that patients who were on hormone replacement therapy at the time of breast cancer diagnosis reported a better prognosis. So after the Swedish publication, there's a professor at the University of California that came out with this statement. For the average North American woman who will be postmenopausal for half of her life, the benefits of estrogen seem strongly established. And the data from this study is not conclusive enough to warrant any immediate change in the way that we prescribe hormones. Harvard Medical School came up with this to say after that publication out of Sweden. We've concluded that the difference between 2.2 and 10 patients was not statistically stable result and not enough to assume that there is an association between estrogen replacement and cancer. This is the other study that is cited from the Lancet in 1997. And it was a survey of 51 studies looking back at the data from 21 countries involving 53,000 people with breast cancer and 108,000 women without breast cancer. And they extracted the women who had been on HRT for over 5 years, and they have found an increase in the breast cancer in women who had taken the hormones for greater than 10 years. The increase was 0.6%. That's less than 1 case of breast cancer for every 100 women taking hormone therapy for 10 years. And that's where matters stood until 2002. 2002 is when all of this changed. 2002, they started what's called the Women's Health Initiative Study. And this study was the largest randomized controlled, placebo-controlled study in the history of women's health. The actual rationale was not to study breast cancer. They wanted to see what hormones did on cardiovascular health, brain health, bone health. It cost nearly $1 billion, and it was the largest prospective study where women were randomized to either estrogen only, ET, estrogens and progesterone, HRT, or placebo. And it was followed over a period of time. The most money ever had gone into this study, and it was halted in 3 years early with massive publications. A little bit of history about this study. The average age of the woman was 63 years old. I feel like okay. Average age was 63 years old. They implied that the results of this study should be applied to menopausal and postmenopausal women of all ages. However, we all know the average age of a woman entering menopause is 51 years old. The average age was 63, and they made carte blanche statement that this information relayed to every woman who is menopausal. They stated the breast cancer risk and relative risk, not absolute. And we'll chat about that again because we talked about that in that Sweden study, but they stated it in relative risk, not absolute. And what that means is that they said that the estrogen and progestin, the HRT data, showed an increase of 24% to get breast cancer. But the absolute numbers was an increase from approximately 5 women in 100 to 6. So how do they get 24%? It was about 5 to 6.2. So 5 is about 20% of, 5 to 6 is a difference of about 20%, just over 20%. So that's how it's a relative risk statement, but the absolute numbers is an increase of 5 women out of 100 to 6. What few people noticed in this first release of data was that they also said the statement that this research almost reached statistical significance. And this is in the paper. Almost reached statistical significance? How do you make such a claim that you'll see in a minute if it almost reaches statistical significance? You either do or you don't when you do research. Anyway, many reporters and physicians worldwide heard this 26% increase in breast cancer and took that as face value, and things changed. Here was their press release. Women's Health Initiative hormone study stopped due to increased breast cancer risk. They went on to add that it increased breast cancer risk, increased coronary heart disease, strokes, and pulmonary embolisms. This shocked the medical community. The executive director of NAMS had a statement. NAMS is the North American Medical Society, or Menopause Society, biggest bombshell that ever hit 30 years in the menopause community. Some of the problems with the hormone study from the arm of the Women's Health Initiative, the average age was 63. That's 10 years past menopause. 70% of these women were overweight or obese, and over 50% of them were smokers. And why did they do that? Because they wanted to study whether or not HRT had a role to play in cardiovascular disease. So they picked a very unhealthy subset of women to see if it was going to affect their heart. The other thing about this study, that they excluded any women who had any menopausal symptoms, examples like hot flashes and insomnia, because they didn't want people to be dropping out of the placebo group. So anyone that had menopause symptoms, they were not even in the study, and the average age was 63 years old. Makes sense for a cardiovascular study, but how do you take the information that you gather and come up with such a claim? This slide I could spend 20 minutes on, but it's actually going to sound like I'm making this stuff up. It's so ridiculous, and there's a lot of information out there about what happened, but I'll give you a little bit of a snippet, and then if you're interested, you could dig and you could find so much information about this. So Dr. Robert Langer was one of the chairs. He was actually the chair of the Principal Investigators Committee for the Women's Health Initiative. There was a group of investigators. They were supposed to be following the data. If you dig into this, they were called into a room at about 9 o'clock in the morning and told what this statement was going to be and what was going to be released in the journal JAMA, this giant medical journal. They were given the statement that I just showed you, that this is being stopped, it increases breast cancer risk, it increases cardiovascular disease. They were told to come up with a rebuttal. You have it until noon, and then we're going to, publish what you say. Noon came, they came up with a rebuttal, and they said, too late, it's gone to press, it's gone to JAMA. And they never had a chance to even say anything. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. Why would they do that? The best that I have been able to read and believe is because they had spent $1 billion in the study. And how do you spend $1 billion in a study to not have anything significant to report? And so they made something that was not statistically significant and reported a relative risk of 25% and made it a huge public announcement and mayhem. And like I said, it sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely, it's crazy, and that's what happened. Other people went on to say these were highly unusual circumstances surrounding determination and reporting of the World or the Women's Health Initiative estrogen progesterone trial, and it resulted in absolute hysteria and misinformation. It led to an 80% drop in HRT and ERT or ET, estrogen, prescriptions almost overnight worldwide. Subsequently, they came out with other statements. So 2 years later, in 2004, the same organization reports no increase in breast cancer associated with the estrogen arm only, which was always the truth. In 2006, it reaffirms its 2004 statement, no increase to breast cancer, women taking estrogen, and now adds that those who had used estrogen in the past can have lower rates of breast cancer than those who have never taken hormones before. And in 2006, they also came out with, and now there's reports that there's no increase of breast cancer even among women who are randomized to take hormone or HRT, estrogen, and progesterone. So they backpedaled. They released a lot of different studies after 2002. They tried to set the record straight. There's people who are still trying to set the record straight. Joanne Manson is one of them. She was an investigator in this. She has written many publications on trying to set the record straight, but the damage is done. Educators and physicians worldwide heard that hormone replacement therapy causes breast cancer and heart disease, and there was and still is no easy way to turn back that page. So That's the most debated topic in hormone replacement therapy, is the breast cancer piece. I'm not going to go any deeper into the breast cancer piece. There's a whole bunch of things that have happened since this study in terms of studying bioidentical hormones. So if you remember correctly, this study was done on conjugated equine estrogens and synthetic progestin. We now know a little bit better. We aren't horses. We don't have the same estrogen as horses. There are a lot of different bioidentical, and bioidentical means the same chemical structure that is in a woman's body. Not to be confused with compounded, which I think a lot of people think is the only way to get bioidentical hormones. Compounding pharmacists can compound bioidentical hormones, but there's also numerous bioidentical hormones on the market produced by pharmaceutical companies. They're only in estradiol form. There are 3 different types of estrogens. There's 4, but 3 that we really use and that are significant when you're talking about hormone replacement therapy, and that's estradiol, which is the most potent and what is in most women's body in their reproductive years. Estrone, which is produced more postmenopausally, and has the most research in causing problems when taken orally. It can go down certain pathways that can, I think, potentially attribute to precancerous possibilities. It's not well studied. And estriol, which is the most predominant when you're pregnant. So only estradiol is available in a drug, Health Canada approved, FDA approved, but there's not many of them: patches, creams, gels, suppositories, and progesterone in the form of prometrium is a pharmaceutical drug that's bioidentical as well. And there's a lot of studies now post Women's Health Initiative on bioidentical estrogens and bioidentical progesterones, but I think that's another talk. What I want to do today is just really show you the research of why so many physicians and educators and schools think that estrogen causes and progesterone causes breast cancer and cardiovascular disease, and educate you a little bit about why that is, and show you where you can find some data and make some conclusions yourself. So cardiovascular disease, we're going to talk about that next. So cardiovascular disease, heart disease, exceeds breast cancer deaths in every single decade of a woman's life from her 30s. And as a woman, the risk of dying, and as they age, it goes to 5 times more women will die of cardiovascular disease than breast cancer. And if you look at this chart, all of the red and orange is cardiovascular disease, and the little snippet piece of the pie that's kind of underneath, that's a blue, is breast cancer. Yet, what are we all afraid of? Breast cancer. But what should we really all be afraid of? Cardiovascular disease. So, again, the World Health Organization, or I would call it the World Health Organization, and it's not. It's the Women's Health Initiative. Data prior to the Women's Health Initiative, throughout the 80s, there were many studies that found a cardiovascular benefit to taking HRT. In 1989, there was a review of 19 published studies on estrogen's effect of heart disease, and it was reported to be associated with at least a 30% reduction in coronary heart disease. In 1991, in the New England Journal of Medicine, they reported consensus that women who were given estrogen postmenopausally have a 40 to 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease. That the Nurses Health Initiative study I talked about before, that it was all nurses studied for, I think it was 20 years, that were maybe too healthy to be included in the research. They reported a decrease of cardiovascular disease by almost 40%. Subsequently, and this is interesting, and I think this sticks in the current research, is a large study found a statistically significant increase in heart disease in women who have known cardiovascular disease, who are receiving hormone replacement therapy, that's both of them, estrogen and progesterone, but only during its first year of use. And I think that sticks. Here again is the headline that came out of the Women's Health Institute. The study was stopped due to increased breast cancer. Went on to add increased rate of not only cancer, but coronary heart disease, stroke, and pulmonary embolisms. So again, that initial message released from the Women's Health Initiative, they implied that the risk of heart disease occurred in all ages of postmenopausal women. But remember, the average age of women in this study was 63 years old. Greater than 70% of these women were overweight, and at least 50% of these women smoked. This is not a healthy population. Even though in the publication, they stated that it was a healthy postmenopausal population of women. Subsequent reports on cardiovascular disease by the Women's Health Initiative, they confirmed that the increase that they saw in cardiovascular disease occurred only in the women in the first year of taking hormones. In 2007, they revised their findings and now concluded that the women who start hormone replacement therapy within the first 10 years following menopause are the only ones that who decrease the risk. I can't actually see my slide here, but I know what I was saying. I just don't know what's in this slide. So what they found is that the women who start taking hormone replacement therapy, if you're 10 years past menopause, it's probably not going to help you. If you start it within 10 years of menopause or before the age of 60, that's when you're going to get the benefits. And that's what the Nurses' Health Study came to the same conclusions. So I'm going to say that again, because that is really important. To get the benefits for hormones and cardiovascular disease, you need to start the hormones within the first 10 years of menopause. Menopause is a year after your last period. You need to start it within the first 10 years of menopause, ideally and usually under the age of 60 to 65, or you're likely not to get those benefits. And the reason being is estrogen protects your blood vessels. It keeps them soft and supple. And if you've been 10 years without estrogen, your blood vessels are not going to be soft and supple, and you can't really reverse that damage. And you also may have already started to develop some plaques within those arteries. And now you take those plaques and you make your arteries soft and supple, you can dislodge those plaques, which is why if you start hormones later in life, you have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease within that first year, because you've now taken not soft and supple blood vessels and maybe full of some plaque, and you've got them soft and supple and expanding, and little clots can move. So you need to take that into consideration. It's not to say you can't do it, but you need to be under the supervision of a physician who's going to do extra precautions during that first year. Baby aspirin, high dose fish oils, things like that. So this is the consensus to date, and generally now accepted in the medical community, not really debated. It has a beneficial effect on the heart for women who start taking hormones early in menopause, because estrogen promotes the healthy blood vessels and delays the formation of plaques. Probably has no protective benefit on women who begin the hormone replacement therapy later in their mid-60s. It's potentially risky for women who begin it in their 60s, especially for the first year, and especially if they have any pre-existing coronary artery disease. And the effects of reduced cardiovascular health disease, and mortality in women initiating around menopause actually suggest a possible role for hormone replacement therapy in the primary prevention of cardiovascular disease. That to me is a big one, Because if you remember, it's going to get us 5 times more likely than breast cancer. And if you look at the research really up until 2002, and there hasn't really been anything of that nature since 2002, your risk of developing breast cancer are probably an increase of 5 out of 100 women to 6 out of 100 women. But you could potentially have a 40 to a 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease if you start taking hormones when your body ceases to produce them. So this is a meta-analysis of randomized controlled studies, and they report an all-case decrease in the all-case mortality in women who initiate hormone therapy when aged younger than 60 years or who are within that 10 years from the start of menopause. However, that protective effect was only found in women who initiated it within this time frame. And that is from the 2017 Hormone Therapy Position Statement from the North American Menopause Society. This is Health Canada's position. They reference solely the Women's Health Initiative. So they approve hormone replacement therapy for the treatment of menopausal symptoms such as hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, insomnia, and to prevent osteoporosis. And they cite the Women's Health Initiative in its breast cancer risk of estrogen and progesterone. Not estrogen alone, but estrogen and progestin. This is the FDA's position. So their approved indication, hot flashes, prevention of bone, hypoestrogenism. And this happens if you've had your ovaries removed at a younger age, or if you've had premature ovarian failure. And also approved for the genitourinary syndrome of menopause. And that's a vulvovaginal atrophy, the increased urinary infections, the painful intercourse, the dry vagina, everything that goes with the no estrogen, which isn't like, oh, I hope that doesn't happen to me. It happens to everybody. Estrogen is the only thing that's going to help anybody there, really. These are the non-debated truths. So the vasomotor symptoms that are associated with menopause, diminished sleep, irritability, difficulty concentrating, reduced quality of life, and poor health status. Compared with placebo, estrogen and hormone replacement therapy was found to reduce those weekly frequency of those symptoms by 75%. Like no other. Nothing else has been studied that shows that they can do that equally or better or anywhere close. It reduces menopausal osteoporotic fractures, hip, spine, all non-spine fractures, even in women without estrogen or without osteoporosis. Estrogen builds bone. Progesterone prevents the breakdown of bone. There's a place for both of them 100%. Estrogen's the one that's been studied the most so, and it absolutely keeps your bones strong. And it's not like when you stop taking it, your bones stay strong. Unfortunately, they go hand in hand. Hormones reduce the genitourinary vaginal symptoms of menopause, the dryness, the burning, irritation, the sexual symptoms of diminished lubrication, pain, all the urinary symptoms of urgency, dysuria, recurrent urinary tract infections. So these are the non-debated truths. These are the Health Canada FDA approved indications. Here are the cautions. Hormone replacement therapy may increase a chance of venous embolism if you start it within 10 years of menopause. I'll put this in too. It may increase the chance of breast cancer if taken for greater than 5.5 years by less than 1 additional case per 1,000 people. I will also cite the Women's Health Initiative. The worst case scenario when they came out the first time, which they have rebutted and said, no, that actually wasn't statistically significant, of an increase of 5 out of 100 women to 6 out of 100 women. They've taken that back. They've now said that's too high. That's not true. We shot that way too high. But let's put that in there. as the worst case scenario, the worst study that's ever come out, it's an increase of 1%. Hormone replacement therapy may increase the chance of stroke if you've started it greater than 10 years after menopause. And it's shown to increase the risk of gallstones. It helps your liver get rid of cholesterol. And in doing so, you can concentrate that in your gallbladder and you can have an increased chance of gallstones. Those are truths. I'm also going to add a little piece, which is not part of this talk because it's going into, again, oral versus transdermal, bioidentical versus synthetic. All of this stuff about venous embolism and stroke is only with oral estrogens. Transdermal estrogens, rubbing it on the skin, patch, cream, does not have the stroke and embolism risk factors. But I'm putting it in because I think you should know worst case scenario. I want to lay it on the table, worst case scenario, here's the research. This is a shocking statement that I almost hesitated to put in because it's so shocking, but again, it's not my opinion. This was published in the American Journal of Public Health in 2013. So the Women's Health Initiative was started in 1996, halted in 2002. So over a 10-year span, starting in 2002, a minimum of, and I think it's 21,000, that shot off from my screen, but I think it's 27,000, and as many as 92,000 postmenopausal women died prematurely because of this study and for coming off of hormones. Shocking. This is why I'm doing this talk. So my opinion, and this is my opinion, this is our biggest obstacle now. We have a generation of doctors who have been taught that hormone replacement therapy causes breast cancer and cardiovascular disease. And it is difficult now to find a physician that is going to be supportive and educated on the actual pros and cons of hormone replacement therapy. And it's really difficult for women to find someone who's going to support them through this process and who is educated, because you have to become educated outside of the medical system. It's not what they're taught in the medical system. And there's a lot of organizations out there doing it. NAMS, well, even the Society for Obstetrics and Gynecology supports the NAMS position paper. So does the American Journal of Obs-Gyn. But the public flavor and the medical community flavor hasn't changed. And until we remedy that situation, women are going to continue to suffer and have decreased quality of life and even shorter life expectancy. There was a slide that shows, and I didn't put it in here, but a study that shows an estimated increase of 3.5 to 4 years on a woman's life for those who take hormone replacement therapy. So I think I've given you pros, I think I've given you cons, I've given you history and the studies. I hope that now you can make a more educated decision, and through an educated decision, you become empowered, and empowered to, if you don't have someone who's supporting you or can't answer your questions, that you know there are people out there that can. NAMS is a good place to go because they do list MDs and NDs that are trained and have taken their certification, and so you can find doctors in your community. Because we're out there, and Shirley, I mean, you're a fabulous resource. I'm sure you're better connected than probably NAMS, and especially in BC.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So here are all the references. So those are all for you to little nighttime reading. I'd like to share this. This is just a 3-minute video that I put together that I'd like you to see. It's quick. I've tried to make it catchy. I've tried to make it something you could share, that you could, you know, send it to a woman who other is struggling and needs some support. And then after this, I think I'll be available to answer some questions.
Oh, good. I'm glad you put this in here. Thank you. Do we have sound?
Do we have sound? Oh, hang on.
I need your sound.
Maybe, okay, I'm gonna do this. How am I going to do this? Maybe I just hook it up to the speaker.
I also have it and I can forward it to everyone. No sound,
No,
Karen.
1 second. I got an idea. I got an idea.
Caution, hot flashes ahead. Are you between the ages of 40 to 55 and struggling with sleep, mood, memory, night sweats, or other new and disruptive symptoms? You may be transitioning through perimenopause or menopause, and this time of your life does not need to be a struggle. I'm Dr. Karen Parmar, naturopathic physician, medical director, and co-founder of Integrated Health Clinic in British Columbia, Canada. Our clinic has been helping women who are struggling with hormone imbalances and hormone deficiencies for the past 20 years, and I think we can help you. Many women fear these transitional years and feel these unpleasant symptoms of mood swings, insomnia, weight gain, and brain fog are normal and inevitable. Some feel they need to power through and deal with these unpleasant symptoms, or they'll be deemed weak or a failure. We're here to tell you that you don't need to suffer. You have options, and choosing hormone replacement therapy may benefit you now and for years to come. In the 1900s, the average woman lived to 50 years. Women today live to an average of 80 years. That's 30 years past reproductive age. Wow, this is great. Yes, great, but different. And without the circulating hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone that have been present in a woman's bloodstream since puberty, hormones play a vital role in brain health, blood sugar regulation, bone health, libido, energy, mood, heart health, and on and on. Take-home message, you don't have to suffer. Maybe you shouldn't plow through. Research has indicated that a woman has a better quality of life, increased longevity, less cardiovascular disease, decreased risk of Alzheimer's, and better bone health if they choose hormone therapy during the perimenopausal and early menopausal years. What to do next? You need to find out if hormone replacement therapy is right for you. You need a physician to educate you on pros and cons, bioidentical versus synthetic, cream, patch, pill, so many options and complexities. If you'd like our assistance, we can set up an assessment to review your health history, family history, and current state of health. We will walk you through your options and come up with a customized hormone treatment plan tailored for you. Consultations can be in person at Integrated Health Clinic or virtually through telehealth. We're looking forward to meeting you and working together for your health. Integrated Health Clinic, British Columbia, Canada. 604-888-8325. www.integratedhealthclinic.com.
Well done, well done.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen so we can see your beautiful face. Here we go. And there's some questions that are filling up the chat. So we have about 30 minutes, which is awesome. I would like to, let me just get, Karen, you're still there, right?
I'm right here.
Okay, good.
You hear me better with my headphones back in? Are you okay?
You sound okay.
Okay.
So if you joined us late, we are taking questions in the chat. You'll just hover your mouse over either the bottom or the top of your screen, find the chat. We will do our best to get through them in the time that we have, which is about another 30 minutes. And if we don't get to your question, or if you do have to leave, we will do our best to answer your question individually over the next week. So that's my promise to you. Before we go there, Dr. Karen, I just really want to say thank you to you. I know that presentation was heavy. There was a lot of data. I appreciate the references, and as well as wrapping it up with your opinions. So thank you so much.
Welcome.
I want to say thank you to everyone who showed up tonight. This is, again, it's a lot of information. It's a lot easier to just read the headline, go to Dr. Google and, click on the first article that comes up and make a health decision that way. And we work really hard to encourage women not to make health decisions based on those headlines. So I want to say to the 70 plus women who signed up for this event tonight, kudos to you. You probably have 1,000 other things you could be doing right now, but you chose to make time to invest in your health tonight. So our applause to you as well. There's something that I would like to plant in everyone's mind, that 92,000 women dying prematurely, that's shocking. And I think we need to talk about the women who live, who, if we think about a mother or grandmother, or maybe an older woman in your life who is in a retirement community, or maybe a senior's home, or maybe still living on her own. It doesn't really matter where she lives, but think about her lifestyle. Is she challenged with incontinence? Is she having memory challenges or susceptible to Alzheimer's? Is she afraid of falling, or has she fallen and broken, a wrist or a pelvis or a hip? These are things that we hear about women on a regular basis. And I think when we hear those stories, there's a part of our minds that go, oh yeah, but she's older. That happens to older people. And I want to back that up to where we are at this opportune time for investing in midlife health, and say, what if there was a way to help us prevent or manage those things from happening? Alzheimer's, incontinence, heart disease, as you emphasized, Dr. Karen, and certainly, the risk of bone fractures. So I want to plant that in your mind, and then I'm going to jump into the chat. I encourage everyone to think about, your questions around hormone replacement therapy in perimenopause, post-menopause. Maybe you are on hormone therapy and you have questions about length of time. So we're gonna get started. I can't see you, Karen. It feels weird.
You can't see me?
I can now. Okay, now I feel better. I want to look at you. I'm going right back up to Uda. So Uda asked the first question, and that is, can you take topical estrogen applied to her leg and vaginal estrogen at the same time? Is that double dipping?
You can, but I don't know why you would have to, because you can take vaginal estrogen and it's absorbed systemically. So unless you're doing one of two things, you're trying to get your level of estradiol where it needs to be for symptoms and managing your symptoms that way, but it's not quite enough for the vaginal symptoms. And then you're adding in an estriol usually, which is we'll say weaker estrogen, which has really great effect locally vaginally. So that's the only reason that I would ever prescribe both, is that I have my patient nice and steady on the biest, probably combination of, estriol and estradiol, usually rubbed, yes, inner thighs or butt, but they're still having vaginal symptoms. And then I would add a little bit extra estriol vaginally. So not knowing what hormones you're talking about, that's the best answer I can give you. I probably wouldn't be doing vaginal estradiol, like biased vaginally and biased on the leg, because that wouldn't make really any sense.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Uda. You can always circle back with me if you need more. Yeah. Shelly wants to know if you're going to be getting a recording of tonight's event, and yes, so watch your email tomorrow morning. I will send a recording of tonight's event, as well as I will resend the links to your bonuses. Diane is interested to know, what is the thinking on hormone therapy for women who have fibroids or PCOS?
Fibroids is sort of an excess estrogen that a woman has in her life, whether or not, you're exposed to too much estrogen or you're not metabolizing it properly. It takes really good gut health to get rid of your estrogen, conjugated estrogen properly. So, and PCOS really is higher androgens, right? It's higher testosterone, and you're not converting down to your estrogen. So that's a little bit tricky when that woman hits perimenopause and menopause in terms of how you want to proceed with support. But when you're at that age, menopause age, the higher estrogen isn't really an issue because you're not really producing estrogen anymore. So I think you don't have to be concerned with taking hormones if you've had a history of those things. I think it's good for your physician to know. And again, this is not a topic for this talk, but the way that you take or you metabolize the hormones that you take, and I don't mean just ones that you take orally. You rub things on your skin, it gets into your system, and you have to get rid of those. And the way that you metabolize hormones, for me, is a really big piece in how I manage my patients who are on hormones. So I would probably assume that that woman who's had fibroids and PCOS had an issue with the metabolization of her hormones in her fertility years. And those issues may continue even though she's not making her own, not having PCOS anymore, and her fibroids are probably shrinking. So it's not a contraindication, but it's a little bit trickier in terms of how you manage the hormones that you're giving them and making sure that they're being eliminating properly.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the key differences between oral and topical hormone therapy?
So oral, anytime you take anything orally, you have to take at least double, if not triple, the amount, because your liver's going to get rid of at least half of it right off the top. It's called the first pass effect. Your liver's getting rid of half of it. So you take something orally, you have to take at least double the dose. And with estrogen, when you take something orally, when you take estrogen orally, it increases an inflammatory response and protein stickiness and adhesiveness, and it makes your blood more sticky. And that's where you have the increased chance of stroke and thromboembolism. Where if you take estrogen transdermally on the skin or vaginally, one, you can take a third of the dose, and two, you do not have that stickiness side effect. It's not going through your liver. It's not increasing those inflammatory and binding proteins. So that's a big difference with estrogen. I never dose estrogen orally. It's always transdermally. And progesterone is interesting because we'll just talk about those two. Progesterone can be used both ways. And oral progesterone, the way it's metabolized, which is down to the alpha pregnanediol, a little bit of a fancy word, but what that means to you is that makes you sleep. Mm-hmm. So oral estrogen helps people sleep. And the cream will protect your uterus, which is really important if you're taking estrogen, but it's not going to help you sleep. So most of the time I'm doing a transdermal estrogen and I'm doing an oral progesterone. There you go. That's good job. Yes. Yeah.
Great answer.
Progesterone does not have the sticky blood issue at all. So it's totally safe to take orally.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes women in the menopause chicks community will get a little tripped up because they think because it's not a cream that it's not bioidentical.
Yeah. No,
I know you mentioned this in your presentation, but I think if we could just pass through that clarification again.
Sure. Bioidentical means chemically the same structure that's in your body. And there are many estrogens that are pharmaceutically derived. They're all derived from either soy or yam, but they come in terms of a patch, estradiol, estroderm, climera. They are bioidentical, and prometrium is the bioidentical progesterone. And that's made by a pharmacy or by a pharmaceutical company too. Yeah. There are some benefits to providing or to prescribing compounded bioidentical hormones, which means you need to go to a special pharmacy like Pure. And there are benefits to that. As a physician, I need to have a reason why I am prescribing that and not prescribing a Health Canada approved bioidentical patented drug. But some of the benefits are I can prescribe estriol with the estradiol in terms of a cream, and that has a bit of a protective effect on some of the proliferative properties of estradiol. And I can change the dose. Prometrium, for example, only comes in 100 milligrams. Maybe a patient needs 250, right? So I can change the dose.
That is so important, because I have typically received a lot of questions or comments from women who say, I tried hormone therapy and it didn't work.
Yes.
And what you just said there is so key, because I mean, for me, when I started hormone, I never tell women what to do, but I always tell everyone what I do. So I started hormone replacement therapy around age 48. I reached menopause at age 49. And you know, the first 2 weeks, headaches. I'd never had a headache in my life. Went back to my naturopath, simple tweak. And it was like, it was golden. Yeah. And we have to continue to remind women that none of this process is a magic wand. It's more like a Rubik's Cube. And one of the benefits is just getting that little tweak with your doctor, and then in getting on with enjoying quality of life, right?
And it is a moving pathway for the perimenopausal and the early menopausal years, where you think you have it figured out, and then you need to change and tweak and change and tweak.
That's a beautiful line. I'm going to steal that. Yeah. Moving pathway.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Joanna is a bit of a long one here, but let me do my best. So she is challenged with bloating and weight gain. She is on bioidentical progesterone, which she started in her 40s to protect or to alleviate PMS headaches. But now that she's on that protocol, she's experiencing a lot of bloating and weight gain.
Okay, well, is she still cycling?
Don't know, Joanna, you can probably let us know. Don't know how old she is.
Okay, so she's in her 40s. Oral progesterone is a bit of a heavy hormone, and for some women, they do have side effects. Bloating and weight gain can be that. I asked if she's cycling because it can also happen when estrogen levels start to dip, and if you're perimenopausal, a lot of women gain weight around that time too. So it may be due to the progesterone dosage, or it may be due to fluctuating levels of estrogen, or it could be completely unrelative and or not related and just a gut issue. I mean, I think we need to throw that out there as well.
Right.
And if she's taking oral, switching to a cream could alleviate that as well, because it's not going through her liver, and she could probably take 30 milligrams of a cream, which would equal 100 milligrams of oral.
Okay.
And have less side effects. You know, there was years and years ago when they did a study on using progesterone to treat breast cancer, head to head with tamoxifen, It won. Progesterone won in terms of breast cancer treatment, but it lost because women couldn't tolerate the side effects. Bloating, weight gain, mood swings, breast tenderness. It lost due to side effects.
Wow.
So it's not like, you know, these hormones do a lot of things in your body. And just because it's bioidentical doesn't mean that, oh, it's natural and it's exactly what my body needs. Sometimes the dose is too much. Sometimes the route of delivery is not right.
Yeah, not customized for you either.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good segue into Pesia's question. What do women do? You've given us a lot of information, a lot of the findings. What does a woman do now who has a family history of breast cancer?
Well, I didn't get into that research, but they've done research on even women who have a family history of or have the BRCA gene, which predisposes you more to breast and ovarian cancer. And it didn't show that hormones increased breast cancer risk. It didn't show, even if you have a family history. I would still be cautious. I would tend to use more estriol than estradiol. I would use an 80-20 ratio in a woman who had a family history. I would make sure that she is well supported with progesterone, because that's going to help to prevent the proliferation of breast tissue. I would make sure she's metabolizing down the right pathways and not pushing things to an estrone, 4-hydroxyestrone pathway. It's going to be a little bit, but there's different ways to push these hormones down, and you want to make sure you're metabolizing down the right pathway. So I would take extra caution. I would probably keep an eye on her urinary elimination pathways twice a year instead of one. And I would probably use more estriol than estradiol. But I don't think it means that you need to not have any hormones, because that's not the case. And if you know, there's an oncologist, Avram Blooming. He's an oncologist. His wife had breast cancer. He is a great he's co-author of that book, and he talks about that book will tell you a lot about breast cancer for people who have it, family history, and he's an oncologist.
This is the book, in case you didn't see my camera. It's called Estrogen Matters, and these are the two authors. It's a great book.
Very good.
Thank you. And I think, if I was to add anything to Pesia's question, it's that it's unfortunate that you have a family history of breast cancer. That doesn't mean that you don't deserve quality of life. And so if your current experiences are not meeting that quality of life bar, then find a healthcare professional that you can work with to achieve that quality of life, and or invest in your long-term longevity and vitality. But it's not a sentence for suffering. It's about showing up to things like tonight, getting informed, building your health team, and then choosing the journey that's right for you. Okay, Joanne has a question about thyroid. Hormone therapy and thyroid. I am on thyroid replacement therapy for Hashimoto's over 10. I'm not sure what that means. Sorry, Joanne. Over 10. Okay, I might come back to you, Joanne. I'm not really sure what the end of that question was.
Maybe over 10 years.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. We can go back.
Okay, I lost my place. Okay, so Laura. Laura is 58. She reached menopause at 54. She's just getting ready, and has an appointment coming up with her gynecologist, but her gynecologist needed blood work and annual mammograms. I'm concerned due to my age.
Concerned to start hormones?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, well, she's in that perfect window. I mean, she's only been menopausal for 4 years, so she's in that perfect window.
Yeah, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think it's a bad request to have her do a mammogram first. I think her physician's doing due diligence to make sure that there's nothing there. And I would just really push that you're getting bioidentical hormones. And again, know that doesn't mean you're asking your MD to do something, only that, alternative medicine. No. Like, they're fully pharmaceutical drugs that your MD should be super comfortable in prescribing.
Yeah, and thanks for coming tonight, Laura, too. That's amazing. Marla has a common question about heart palpitations. Do you want to speak to that?
Very common symptom of decreasing estrogen and decreasing hormones in particular.
She's almost 50, so.
Yeah, so such a common symptom of menopausal changes.
With options available.
Absolutely, options available. Yeah.
Her question is, could hormone replacement therapy or estrogen therapy be a smart investment to protect my heart?
I think the research says absolutely. How old is she?
50.
Yes, right in the window. Absolutely.
But she has asked the question about HRT and ET. So if you have a uterus, Marla, you will,
Yeah. But remember, the studies with HRT are on oral estrogen and synthetic progestin. So we don't need to do that, right? So our HRT, and you need to do progesterone. If you have a uterus, you have to do progesterone because there's no doubt about it. And estrogen will make your uterine lining grow, and it grows, and then that predisposes you to endometrial cancer. You cannot do estrogen without progesterone if you have a uterus. And I actually think that progesterone has gotten a bad rap because it was synthetic and the one that was studied.
Right.
And it's involved in the prevention of breakdown of bone. And it is a smooth muscle relaxant. I think it plays a role in cardiovascular health. You know, it keeps your blood vessels relaxed, and it helps you sleep, and it helps stop estrogen from stimulating your breast receptors. So I think, you know, our entire life we've been balanced with estrogen and progesterone. You know, estrogen rises at ovulation, and then progesterone rises after. And it's been this cascade and this symphony of those hormones for most of our life. And I wouldn't want to do one without the other, even if I didn't have a uterus.
That's great. Okay, I'm really happy that this question got posed. I can't see the name of the woman asking, but should hormone therapy be taken preventatively if I'm not experiencing any hormone imbalance symptoms?
So that is such a personal question. I would for sure look at your family history. You know, my family history, my grandmother had Alzheimer's at 68. My mom's mom was in a wheelchair from osteoporosis, and my dad died of a heart attack in the middle of the night 6 years ago. So am I going to do hormones? Am I doing hormones? Absolutely. Cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. So I think you need to look at your family history and see really what sort of genes you've inherited. And then consider the research that has been done about, and I didn't even talk about Alzheimer's tonight because it hasn't been studied as well as cardiovascular disease. And I want to stick with really what is out there right now. But most of the information out there shows a great benefit to preventing Alzheimer's disease. And us as women, it's a disease for women. We're 7 times more likely to get Alzheimer's. And estrogen has been the link. And the decrease of estrogen is thought to be a very big cause for Alzheimer's. So, you know, maybe do a little bit more reading. Maybe get the book on that estrogen matters and start walking down that path and see where it leads you. But yeah, my choice, where it's time for my opinion now, I am going to be on hormones. I think it's going to increase my quality of life, decrease my chances of following in my family's path, and live longer, healthier.
I so appreciate your response to that question. I love the question. I really appreciate your response. Women love to hear from their healthcare professional the answer to what would you do. Mm-hmm. They love that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. That's amazing. And thank you for the question. Another preventative story, if you're interested, the first chapter of Mokita is, the whole book is inspired by my sister, but the first chapter is about my sister. She had cancer as a child, reached menopause at age 36, and her hormone therapy journey for nearly 30 years, she's a healthy 63-year-old right now, was preventative. She was 36. She really didn't have any choice but to invest in her longevity at that time. So that's another preventative story I think that's worth sharing, and certainly inspired my journey as well. And sorry, if you are a member of the Menopause Chicks community, and if you're not, please send an invite to join tonight. In our units section, which is our frequently asked questions, most popular topics, there's a section called Office Hours, and Dr. Karen has an amazing video in there about Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's prevention with women. So go have a look at that. Okay. Louise would like to know, what are the tests that we need to request so that we know our current levels and then know what type of hormone therapy we need at this current time?
So your estradiol, which is the only estrogen that can be measured in your blood. And if we're talking about tests through the conventional system and your GP, we're going to talk only about serum, because that's what is in the Life Lab system. So estradiol, progesterone. I would have a look at your DHEAS. That's a measure of the adrenal hormone, DHEA, which then converts down to estrogen and testosterone. Your FSH and LH determine that you truly are postmenopausal. I could go on, but I'll add one more, and that's likely your AM cortisol. Yeah. You could do your testosterone too. I mean, women's testosterone drops, but not at the rate and the significance of estrogen and progesterone. So a lot of women end up being a little bit more testosterone even dominant because the other hormones are just so plummeted. So you could look at it, but it's not typically, the one that I look at. But DHEA, estradiol, and progesterone, FSH, LH. Yeah.
Great. Louise, thanks for that question. I hope that was helpful. Joanne, I see you're back. Could you please retype your question? I know you had a question about thyroid, but I've lost the first half now. So if you could just retype it into the chat, I'd really appreciate that. Michelle says, I'm 47. I've been taking progesterone on and off for symptoms for approximately 10 years. Taking it on and off, that's interesting. It has helped quite a bit over the years. My question would be, is it dangerous to be on it this long? It's been on it 10 years. Should it be mixed with estrogen? I still have a fairly regular cycle.
Yeah. So no, not dangerous. Not dangerous at all. We're used to having high levels of progesterone, and we really should. Excuse me. Progesterone competes with cortisol. I should say cortisol is a thief from progesterone. And we live in a very high stress, go. And we tend to deplete our adrenal glands, and our body needs cortisol to survive. Like, cortisol is more important for survival than progesterone. So we will often pull from progesterone to make cortisol. And I would say, if I'm going to look at what the most common pattern of women is from 25 to 40, it's more estrogen dominant, progesterone deficient. So you probably really just were physiologically dosing yourself for the last couple 5-10 years. But no, you can't take too much progesterone. You might feel gross, heavy, bloated, but you can't take too much. Perimenopausal years, your estrogen does this. So when you're down, you would do better with estrogen. But then the problem is, the next cycle, you're like this, and then you're like this. So I have dosed estrogen in perimenopause, but with those patients, I need to keep a really close eye on them, because every cycle is different. And anyone who's gone through this or going through this knows it. One cycle is 21 days, one's 45, one you're flooding, one you have nothing, one you have breast tenderness, one you have none. And that is this ride of estrogen. So what is for sure is progesterone is more deficient. The quality of the egg determines your amount of progesterone. Our quality of our eggs are not great past 40. So progesterone is a standard prescription. Estrogen, though, in women who have more insomnia, heart palpitations, starting to get some hot sweats, that's where I would bring the estrogen in a little microdose, and really work with that woman to identify early in her cycle what her estrogen levels are. And if you get to tune in your body, you can kind of predict those. You would have more increased lubrication around ovulation if your estrogen levels are okay. If you're really, really dry, you probably don't have much estrogen. So you can try to follow each cycle and then microdose, but it's a difficult thing to do on your own during perimenopause. When you stop cycling, that's when you need estrogen.
Great answer. Hopefully that was helpful to you, Michelle. I just glanced at the time. It's 6:28. We have about 12 more questions in the queue right now. If you have to leave, Dr. Karen and I are going to stay for a few more minutes. If we can't get to all of the questions, because some of them do take a few minutes to respond to, we will follow up with you in the coming week. So I just wanted to clarify that. Dr. Karen, are you okay going for a few more minutes?
Yep.
Okay, great. Catherine, I think, requires some clarification. The first part of her note here says, based on your presentation, you should only be on hormone therapy for approximately 5 years, question mark.
No, I think there was one study that showed that if you were on hormone therapy for greater than 5 years, you had a increase of 1% of breast cancer. I think that's the only time I mentioned 5 years. But no, there, you know, the NAMS, the North American Menopause Society, in 2010 had the philosophy that you should be on as little hormones as you need to be for a short amount of time to get through your symptoms. That's not the philosophy anymore. You know, you don't want to take more than your body needs, but there is no good research that says that we need to stop when we hit 70 or 65. There isn't.
I think that helps to clarify that. Can you start too early?
With estrogen, yes. And for sure with progesterone. I think you could start too early with either one of them. You know, I think the age group that we're chatting about, like 40 plus, we're past our really fertile years. Our hormones are not like they were in our 20s and 30s. And for most people, it's a deficiency of at least progesterone. Like I said, estrogen can do this, and perhaps you can start too early with estrogen. Most people will be symptomatic, really sore breast, headachy. It's pretty easy to tell. These, you know, this medication is you know, very effective, and it's palpable when you take them. So that the perimenopausal years with the estrogen, I think you could be overdosed. I guess you could be overdosed at any point in time, but that would be the only time that I'd really give caution, is when you're still ovulating. Do you really need estrogen? Are you making enough your own?
Great. Okay. Catherine, thanks for coming. I hope this was a good step in the right direction to help you make a decision that's right for you. I have to get to this next question from Marion, because she lives in a small northern village in the Arctic, and her GP will not prescribe hormone therapy. She is pre-diabetic, and the only way her GP will put her on hormone therapy is if he also puts her on statins and diabetes medication. I do not want this. What are my options? It's kind of complex, but Marianne, I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah.
I have a soft spot for anyone that's in a community that doesn't have access to the same type of resources that I have, or many of us have. So
that is super tricky. I don't know why the ultimatum. That strikes me a little bit odd. You know, I will give it to you, but only if you go on statins and diabetic medication. I don't know. You know, for sure the pre-diabetes is an issue, and maybe he really just wants you to deal with that first. And I think that, you know, and perhaps some of the recommendations, if he was going to go down the metformin path, I mean, that's not a bad medication. It really isn't. It's derived from French lilac. And I think glucose and insulin resistance are probably the precursors of all the other 3 types of chronic disease. So I think that's good that he wants you to address that. I don't know if there's some resources for you, Shirley, or through NAMS, or that could find maybe someone closer to you that you could see, that could at least do an initial visit and then, you know, see once a year and get you on a prescription. I know I do that for a lot of patients who are not, you know, in my community, but I do need to see somebody. And, you know, especially if you're out of province with, I need to have that connection in my own province. That's a tricky one. I think you have to continue your search. I mean, you're obviously on a path, and you're trying to become educated and on a search to find someone that's going to help you. And hopefully through this, you find somebody, because that's not that opinion. He's a little bit of a lone ranger on that. There's a lot of people out there that would, you know, be wanting to help you.
Yeah. And I think, you know, with the onset of the recent pandemic, there are more opportunities via telehealth platforms. I don't know exactly where you live, but if you want to contact me and we can do a little bit of concierge work and try to connect you. It might mean, as Dr. Karen said, one in-person visit if that's at all possible, but then you might be able to continue your health management through telehealth, and that would be amazing. So please, Marianne, reach out to me. Shannon's asking a question. Love it. I don't love it that she's experiencing this, but I love that she brought up the question. She's currently estrogen dominant and has been prescribed topical progesterone. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Do you want to explain estrogen dominance? Because I think that sometimes trips us up, even just the language around it, right?
So we live in a sea of estrogen. Our plastics get broken down into estrogen byproducts. Pesticides are estrogen mimickers. Cosmetics, parabens, phthalates, they're all estrogen mimickers, BPA. So we have a lot of estrogens out there. There's a lot of women who are on birth control, and it's in the water, and the water really is our drinking water, but filtered. We're exposed to a lot of estrogens. And our dairy products, it's a female lactating cow. It doesn't matter if it's organic. It's a female lactating cow. It's a lot of estrogen. So we are exposed to a lot of estrogen. So there's a lot of us in our reproductive years that tend to have, this imbalance of estrogen high, progesterone low. It's even possible to have not even estrogen high, progesterone low, but progesterone really low, estrogen normal, and you still look like you're estrogen dominant. So dominant estrogen means that in the way that your body is producing symptoms and having a cycle, you're having more effects of estrogen than progesterone. So using topical progesterone totally can help. I'd also want to know where you're getting this excess estrogen from. Are you truly excess estrogen, or are you just really deficient in progesterone? And if you are excess, is it because of your intake, or are you not eliminating it properly? And that sort of investigation, like I said before, is super important for me because it is part of how you stay healthy while you're on hormones.
Great. Okay. I'm going to try to do some rapid questions because I know you have to get ready for your vacation, Dr. Karen. Did you say the BRCA gene? And if so, is there a test that we can ask our doctor to run in order to find out if we have that gene?
I am going to get back to you on that. I know that we do it privately. My husband does a lot of cancer treatment and is super educated on that. So I know that we do that in our clinic. I know it's out there. I'm just not sure if you can access it through a GP or if you need to go to a specialist. So I will find that out and I'll get that back to you, Shirley. And
great. And we'll get back to you, Shelley. Shelley's the one asking the question. Amazing. Anita would like to know, does hormone therapy help with incontinence?
If it's due to like 10, 15 years postmenopausal and you start estrogen, yes. If it's due to like that vaginal atrophy and the whole genital urinary syndrome of menopause, then estrogen vaginally, estrogen, on your labia and inner thigh will help with that. It'll tighten tissue. If it's in your younger years, I would say probably not. Maybe more of a pelvic floor physio. Some other routes might be more beneficial for you because you probably have adequate amounts of estrogen if you're cycling or just, early in your menopausal years.
Okay. She's maybe Anita, you can circle back with me too. She's also experiencing hair loss, which comes out a lot in the community. Hair loss connected to hormones?
It's connected to a drop of hormones and a drastic drop. So if it's happening and happened really close to when you just stopped to have your period, then I would say yes. And a lot of women would be able to relate to that where they've had a child and then postpartum, your hair starts falling out, that drop in hormones. So that it could be related in that way, and that fits into the time frame. But really, hair loss, I really think more thyroid and iron.
Yep, that's what I think of as well. Anne wants to know, should men consider hormone therapy for the prevention of cardiovascular and Alzheimer's disease?
There is no study with testosterone and Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is really not that frequent in men. It definitely is more frequent, 7 times more frequent in women. Cardiovascular disease, there's some good research on testosterone and cardiovascular disease. I am not as up to date on it because I don't treat men. I have only treated women in my practice, but I do know that it exists, and yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, we've got Joanne's question. She's been on thyroid medication for 10 years and would like to know if there's anything she needs to consider before taking hormone replacement therapy.
Well, no, there's no contraindication with thyroid replacement therapy and hormones. But I'd want to make sure that her T3 and T4 levels are where they should be, and that her dose is adequate. So we know what symptoms she's having may be attributed to thyroid, and make sure that they're not before we start hormones. But no, you can absolutely take the two together.
Okay. Final question has to do with heavy bleeding and irregular bleeding. Is hormone therapy an option for that?
Heavy bleeding is a sign of estrogen dominance. Estrogen makes your lining grow. Remember that study? They had to start adding progesterone because you get endometrial thickness. So estrogen makes your lining grow. Progesterone protects your endometrial lining. So most likely that person is entering, well, not entering, in perimenopause, which can be up to 5-7 years. Progesterone levels aren't sufficient, and most women will start flooding heavy periods before their period leaves. And that's because you're producing way more estrogen than progesterone. And that's when the single dose progesterone, oral, vaginal, can do wonders to protect that lining and really decrease the heavy bleeding.
Amazing, amazing. There are a number of other comments here, and they all are expressing gratitude to you. So I would like to add to those comments and say thank you. I know you've been away. You are the mother of 4 children. You run a very busy practice, and you took the time to put together this amazing content for menopause chicks. So on behalf of all of us, Dr. Karen, thank you very, very much for doing this tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks.
Any closing messages?
Oh, just continue the journey, get informed, stick together. Like, we women need to stick together and spread the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. And then you deserve quality of life. And
Absolutely.
I so appreciate all of you taking the time to show up tonight and to get more education. So we're going to close off. I'm going to be sending you a copy of this recording tomorrow morning. Please be kind, stay safe, be healthy.
Bye, everyone.